who here wants to invest outside of Sydney? Please put your hand up. So basically everyone. and so please keep your hand up. And keep your hand up if you have very little idea of how to actually invest outside of Sydney. Okay, so kind of like more than 50% of people actually who want to invest outside of Sydney have no idea how to do that. And so obviously, I can't kind of solve everyone's problems in 5 minutes, but effectively, if you know how to do suburb research, which isn't based on, is the cafe nice, or is it close to a school, or is it close to a shopping centre? Is there a nice feel about the place where there's nice streets? None of that. If you know how to do suburb research based on data, like online search interest, market, development land supply, etc., there's some factors there and dimensions to look at. Then it doesn't matter if you know the area or you don't know the area. It doesn't matter if you're even living in Australia or not living in Australia. The data is completely objective. Does that make sense? So then if the data is objective, then whether you want to buy in the ponds, which by the way I wouldn't recommend, or if you want to buy somewhere in Brisbane, which everyone is spruiking to the hill, or if you want to buy in Adelaide or anywhere, it's the exact same methodology, right? And so that sort of helps overcome where to buy interstate, and then how you actually go about doing it, like that's the easy part, right? That's the easy part. You find the suburb, you then find within the suburb what are the right pockets, the right types of streets. Once again, more qualitative, quantitative data can help with that. So things like, where's the housing commission? What's the zoning like? Is it likely to change? Where are the flood zones? Where are the bushfire zones? We don't want to be too far away from, sort of key things in that suburb. Then you can kind of get almost like a map on Google and kind of take a red highlighter and say, these are not the areas in the suburb that I want to invest in. And then basically you've got your streets, right? And then you say, okay, well, what type of property does the average renter and or owner-occupier want in the suburb? Right, so like for the clients in this room, I always say, don't be a hero. Like if the average is a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 2-garage, don't get a 5-bedroom, don't get a 4-bedroom. You kind of think, oh, I'm going to be a little bit special and get something a little bit better than the average person. That doesn't work. Because the average person who wants to buy or rent, they don't want that thing. They just want the average. So property investing should be about being boring, right? The more boring you are, the more success you'll get in a passive strategy, right? So that's, in an essence, how you find the right type of dwelling. And then the way to actually get that, everyone knows real estate and domain, like that's not hard, setting up alerts, but then you establish relationships with the agents in that suburb. And oftentimes, and I hope there's no buyer's agents here, but oftentimes buyer's agents kind of go on about how it takes years and it's their full-time job to establish industry relationships. I don't want to put you on the spot, Sneha, but how long did it take you to establish the relationships that you did in Adelaide to buy that house? This is not prepared, so I'm sorry to put this one.
Hello everyone. So as Peter mentioned, we bought a property recently in Adelaide, and I would be very frank, we were not able to establish strong relations with agents in Adelaide because the market was booming, and I had absolutely no call back from even a single agent. So it absolutely did not happen because no one was interested in selling a property which is off market or under market, and all of them said, look, we're very busy right now. If you want anything, just go on real estate, and we're putting everything there. So we're not catering to anything personal. Well, said and done, because I was chasing up with all the agents from past 2 months. So I started in October, and it took me all the way until January, and I did not form any relation with anyone. Having said that, when I could see the right property, it took me just 1 day to get the property under contract without having any prior relation with the agent as well. Just because I asked him a couple of questions which I wanted to answer, which I wanted to be answered, and he gave me all the right information. And when he understood that we were serious buyers, he didn't even let the property go for the open home. I mean, he did let the property go for the open home
There you go.
So I didn't have any relation with aviation.
So from start to finish, we did a thing on YouTube.
Yeah.
3 weeks.
Sorry?
3 weeks. I think it took you from really being serious in that suburb
Yeah.
to then buying the
Yeah,
property.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. More or less, because we were looking at another suburb before.
Yeah.
We couldn't buy that. So, yeah, I started in January, and by the end of January, but then again, you need to discount the fact because it was Christmas season and everyone was on a holiday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I saw this property in the evening, and I could get it under contract on Friday.
There you go. There you go.
No relation.
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't mean to put this
No,
on.
that's
But what I'm just trying to demonstrate here is that, like, just kind of strip back all the sales and marketing. Raw property investing is not hard, right? I think everyone makes it out to be more harder than it is, because I could be up here on the stage telling you how you need to pay me $15,000 to do it for you, but you really don't. Right? Like, it took 3 weeks without any relationships buying interstate. So when you can do that, and, I mean, if you can develop relationships, that's even better, and get the off-market opportunities, then you can buy interstate very easily. The property managers will do your inspections, most of the time completely free of cost. So, you know, you guys are thinking, look, I'm in Sydney, no one really wants to go to Sydney Airport and catch a flight every weekend. You don't have to, right? You find the property. Your local property manager in Adelaide or Perth or Bendigo or Brisbane or wherever you're buying will do the inspections for you. And the thing is that, like, they're much better at doing them than me or any of you probably, because this is what they do for a living. They know the tenant demand. They know even the qualitative aspects of what renters want in that suburb. So they'll say, look, this bedroom size is a little bit too small. This is going to be hard to rent out. You would have no idea if you went and caught a flight, you know, rocked up with a hire car and sort of figured out, you know, if this is right or wrong. So you just outsource it to the professionals, and for them it's like business development. You know, if you buy the property, they get a 10, 15-year income, right? Because they're managing the property for you. So this is the kind of things that people don't really openly advertise. And that's completely free. Like, you can go off and literally do it tomorrow. Like, you don't even need to work with me. And it's so easy. And then the negotiation. Like, I know so many of you will be thinking, look, you know, maybe I'm an immigrant, you know, being in Australia or Sydney for less than 5 or 10 years. I don't know how the legal system works. I don't know how to negotiate, all that kind of thing. Once again, everything can be done remotely. In fact, you should never, never, never negotiate over the phone with a real estate agent. Right? One of my client failure stories, just 2 weeks ago, in Bendigo in the suburb, the client got a property. The valuation was, I think it was $375. He got it for $370. On a Friday evening, the agent said, it's yours. And then on a Sunday, he got a call saying, sorry, we've sold it to someone else for $382 unconditional. Right? He had that property sold to him, like the agent confirmed on Friday. But because he didn't follow, he didn't negotiate and go through the process on the contract for sale in writing, then, you know, agents can be, there's ethical agents and there's agents. So, you know, once again, if you know how to negotiate, it's not hard. It's not like rocket science. All of this stuff can be done remotely. And then you're like, oh, well, how do I find a tenant? The property manager handles that. How do I pick up the keys? The property manager handles that. Like, literally, the property manager, you're nodding because it's true. The property manager is literally more useful to each and every one of you than I am. Like, the property manager is your best friend. Does that make sense? Okay, so that was kind of a long-winded way of answering your question. Sorry about that. Who else would like to volunteer what their kind of... Yeah?
Sorry to be holding the limelight. Hi everyone. So my major concern right now out in our property journey for me and my husband was, initially we did not know about suburb selection, but luckily after we did the course, we were kind of confident with that. The second part, which was a completely uncharted territory, was the finance aspect of property, of buying the properties, because from the beginning, we were completely reliant on the mortgage broker, and we didn't understand most of the things relating to LVR, relating to how how do we go on interest only, how do we do the refinancing. So right now, after buying 3 properties, we are having a lot of difficulty moving forward because we are on principal plus interest and the banks are refusing to go on interest only since they're asking us to either refinance or they're having different clauses. So that's one of the major hindrances we're facing, and we're not able to move forward with that. I think I was quite lucky to sit right next to the very good person because he had a lot of knowledge. Michael helped me a lot understanding different aspects of mortgage broking because we were not aware of it. He helped me understand a little bit of borrowing capacity, what can you do when you reach your capping. I think that's what we're facing now because we've reached the end of our serviceability, and we're not able to move forward because we are on principal plus interest and we're not able to save anything from our investment property. So whatever deposit we put for our next property, it has to come from our savings. And sometimes if you're on a little higher interest rate, you sometimes have to put money out of your pocket. So that's really bad. So I was having a very good discussion with Michael, who was trying to suggest alternatives. He was trying to ask a few technical questions which I didn't answer as well because I was completely reliant on the mortgage broker. So I think it's more of an eye-opener that you need to get your head together and understand the nitty-gritty details of finance which we ignore, and so I think that's where we're stuck right now and we can't move forward.
Yeah. Well, Michael, would you like to illuminate everyone?
Offline discussion.
Offline discussion. But if anyone wants to chat with Michael, at least from the group, I think he's a very knowledgeable guy, so feel free to chat with him afterwards. Okay, maybe one last one. One other kind of key challenge, pain point, struggle that you communicated with your newfound friend? Or was that kind of it? Like, were those the only things? I'm just going to stand here and look at it.
My partner was, sorry about that. My partner was,
Do you want to come up here?
My partner was basically just, it's the same, probably most of us face, would be just financed after investing in property, got the equity. So the question is, how do you increase your income? Well, how do you get the rent?
Yeah. And that's kind of the age-old question, right? Like, at some point, you do max out your borrowing capacity. It's not that you can buy 10 properties in a year, or you can buy even 3 properties in 2 years for a lot of people. The harsh reality is that the predominant input in calculating your borrowing capacity is your income, right? But that doesn't mean that if you can't buy another property tomorrow, that you can't ever buy another property, right? The acquisition phase of a typical property portfolio, like I know for myself, it took about 6 or 7 years to actually build the number of properties we needed, my wife and I needed, to actually get to where we wanted to go. So, like, I remember after 2 years, we bought 4 properties, and we were capped out. But then we needed for the LVR to come down. We were paying it off. We waited for the equity to go up. I remember our incomes increased as well. Fortunately, we were in jobs where we got kind of yearly pay rises. And like, I remember literally, and you don't have to do this, this isn't a recommendation, but I remember for the first 3 or 4 years of our property acquisition phase, like, I would think twice about even buying ice cream from Coles, right? Like, coming home, I was used to be an investment banker and, like, working really hard, and like, I would work extra hard so that the company would pay for my dinner, right? Like, if you want to acquire properties very quickly, you need to be a very diligent saver. And disposable income is obviously what banks look at. So there's no kind of secret source, notwithstanding what Michael might have to say later, in increasing your borrowing capacity. But the reality is that for me, I was able to sacrifice more and get the portfolio quicker. And for other people, it might take 10 years to build their portfolio. For another person, it might take 15 years. Like, we're all different. There's no cookie cutter strategy. So hopefully that answers the question to some extent. Just because you can't buy another one now, you shouldn't get demoralized, right? Like, we're not all Bill Gates. We can't just buy 1 million properties tomorrow. It takes time. That's why the strategy is so different. Okay. Can everyone still hear me at the back with music playing in the background? Okay, cool. So the next part of the night, I thought what we would do, as kind of arrogant as it sounds, I was just going to introduce my background a little bit, but let me just ask if you guys actually want to hear it. Please put your hand up if you don't want to hear my property background and story. You're either very polite. Yeah, so I just kind of share this not kind of as a show-off thing, but just to show you that it's actually possible, right? So my wife and I, or girlfriend at the time, we started investing in 2010. That was when we first graduated from university. With respect to borrowing capacity, fortunately, our incomes were pretty good. I was an investment banker, and she was a chartered accountant. And so together, we had some borrowing capacity. Look, that's just the harsh reality. It's very easy for me here to say that every person in this room can achieve 100K passive income in 10 years. And that's what you'll hear in all the sponsored ads on Facebook and seminars and all that kind of stuff everyone's nodding their head. It's not true, right? This kind of goes against me trying to sell you guys a course, but it's not true. Everyone's individual circumstances and situation is different. So we were on good incomes. And because we were on good incomes, we were able to build a portfolio very quickly. And I remember, I was working 90 hours weeks here in Sydney, actually at JP Morgan on the equities desk, trading stocks institutionally. And I remember going to seminars. There'd be hotels and places like that, conference rooms, and there'd be someone like me right now kind of spruiking some strategy, and they would say, look, you can achieve X, Y, Z, and all you really need to do is buy properties with great depreciation in high growth areas with low vacancy, population is growing, infrastructure is going up. And I was just thinking, if that was all there was to it, then why isn't everyone rich, right? Because that's not hard to do. Right? Anyone can Google for 10 minutes. So I didn't really buy that, and to be honest, my wife, or girlfriend at the time, we kind of lost trust in people exactly like me. So I just decided to do it myself. My background was statistics and finance, so I sort of compiled all the property data that was available at the time. I can't remember everything right now, but average vendor discounting, stock on market, online search interest ratios, building schemes, job advertisement trends, etc., etc. And I built a bit of a system based on multivariate regression analysis. So what multivariate regression analysis, to bore you on your Tuesday night, is a statistical way of saying that if there's multiple variables, how do we understand their relative weightings? And how do we understand which of them are actually correlated to capital growth the most? Because, when you actually do that analysis and normalize for autocorrelation, which means, isolating each variable, you find that things like proximity to CBD, put your hand up if you've heard that proximity to CBD is a key thing that you need to look out for, right? You find that proximity to CBD has absolutely no, what we call R-squared, or statistical correlation with capital growth. And I'm not a Sydney local, but you guys can just see it here. Mosman, has that gone up in value in the last 10 years? Yep. Has somewhere 30 or 40 kilometers gone up in value in the last 10 years? Has Mosman gone up in more than kind of Ponds or Bella Vista or Mount Druitt in relative terms? No. So when you just kind of, property investing is uncommon sense. Because you're fed all these things, you start to believe in it. When you apply your uncommon sense, you feel and you start to understand what reality is. So none of these things actually matter. They're nice to have, but none of them actually matter. So I built this system. It's not an algorithm. It's not magic. But that's how my partner and I, we started investing, and I'm sure there was a lot of luck involved, but we started getting some success. And so we bought one property after another. I have no properties in Sydney. All negatively geared, never buy negatively geared property. And about 5 years ago we started doing residential development and commercial development, and about 5 years ago as well I started helping people, just family and friends like you guys, completely free of cost, right? And then when those people, like cousins and uncles and all these kinds of people, started getting some success, that gave me the confidence to actually formalize this thing, because it's completely not mainstream, right? To formalize it and yeah, make it a side business. And so, now, and once again, I don't want this to come across as kind of a big-headed thing, but now we don't work, and we have the passive income that we need, and I teach people. The reason I'm sharing this is because so many people have this apprehension or inhibition, or kind of they're just so scared of taking the first step or the next step, right? So many of you, I'm sure, like, put your hand up if you've already invested in property and in hindsight it wasn't the best decision, right? Thanks, Anish. Like, so many people have made mistakes and then they lose faith in property investing, right? And put your hand up if you've never invested in property and you're like, I don't want to make a huge mistake, I'm too scared to take the first step, I don't even know where to start. Please put your hand up. Please be honest. Yeah. There you go, right? It's very common. So I'm sharing my story only for the reason that it serves to inspire you. Like, it's actually possible. Now, I'm not saying everyone can achieve what I did. Like, we were very fortunate with our incomes to be able to have the borrowing capacity and all that kind of thing. But what is possible is for you not to have to rely on your pension when you turn 65, or for most of people in this room, when you turn 90, right? Like, by the time we hit that age, the pension's not going to be there. And if you take action now, like, I'm not here to guarantee anything, but you can kind of guarantee that you won't be relying on the pension at all, or at least not as much, if you take the right steps. So that's kind of all I want to say about my story. It's kind of not about me. But the next part of the program, what I want to just do is, I just want to hear from you what you want to get from tonight. Like, we're already about 45 minutes, an hour into it. I don't know how long this is going to go, but I just want to make sure that you guys are getting value, right? So I'm just going to point at you randomly, and if you don't mind, just tell me what your expectations are for this program. So I'll just ask like 5 or 6 people, and then hopefully we can meet those expectations. Is that okay? Is that alright? I know this is like really unorthodox the way of doing this, but maybe we'll just start with you. So why did you come?
So I already bought a property 3 years ago. So my sort of plan is to go again. The first one did go out. So I'm trying to get more roles and see how I can improve and what I do. So that's why.
More knowledge, any specific type of knowledge? Or?
Just like really like house or unit,
Yeah.
where which areas,
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just do the house and unit one right now. Who else has that question? Should you buy a house or a unit? Okay. Everyone else knows the answer? Who knows the answer to that? You know the answer?
Kind of.
Can you explain the answer?
I've seen your videos, so I'm going to see that. But kind of makes sense from personal experience. So,
Right.
if you want me to explain.
Yeah,
again.
please.
Yeah. So basically, from personal experience in last 6 years, we bought a unit. Went up in a little bit price growth happened, which is now investment property. But friends who bought houses and lands in Ponds, Kellyville, their prices have doubled. So that kind of was a learning lesson. For us, it was very organic growth from unit, now house, but we want to invest more. But now, I think I will not invest in unit. That's just from my personal experience. Depending also on the location where we are. So houses kind of make sense. So that's my and watching his videos. He's been recommending houses too. But depending on the area. So that's it.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, but that's dead right. So like, the kind of top things that come to my mind when you talk houses versus units, right? So when you think units, like, you can literally build to the sky. Like, of course, different councils have different zonings and things like that. But when you have a piece of dirt, like hopefully it's not in your book, you have a piece of dirt, there's some scarcity. you don't really have a piece of dirt when it comes to a unit, right? So I don't remember because I wasn't investing at the time, but just after the Sydney Olympics, World Square, the apartments were built, in the city. And I think they were selling for like around $450,000, like a really nice kind of two-bedder, shiny, all that kind of thing. And like that was like the bee's knees. Like there was marketing brochures, there was like, it was all over everything. And so many people were getting in, Sydney was on the world map, world city, after the Olympics actually mattered back in the year 2000. And now those same apartments, they're worth about $500,000. So the growth has been like $50,000 in about 20 years, right? And that's obviously like that's a hyperbole, that's a really extreme example. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because there was literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of units or apartments being built around there in the subsequent 20 years, that's why the prices don't go up. And that's the same for Melbourne when you talk South Bank, South Yarra, Docklands, you talk in Brisbane, South Bank, Gold Hills, Albion, you talk obviously in Sydney. I don't know who has an apartment in close to the city in Sydney. Hopefully no one. Right now the vacancy rate's like more than 5%. Prices have come down by 15% since COVID started. It's because there's no scarcity, right? So generally speaking, like a safe rule to work by, you shouldn't buy any villas. But there's always exceptions to any rule. So like sometimes villas or ground level kind of townhouses built in the 70s, 80s, especially in Melbourne, kind of inner city areas, it's kind of unit complex of 3 or 4, they can work out. There's some scarcity. But if you don't want to think about it too much, never buy an apartment. Not personal advice. And I mean, the other reason as well is the yield looks really attractive on paper, but after the body corp, after unexpected sinking levies, all this kind of thing, it ends up in most cases not actually being cash flow positive. Does that help? There you go.
But can you just also cover like units as in like ground units?
Yeah.
The apartments. So you know when people have lots of units.
That's right.
Kind of reflex.
Right.
What about those?
So that's like I said, it's not too bad. So I know like this is kind of giving away a little bit too much, but like Mitcham in Melbourne, eastern side, that's a suburb that we were investing in. Actually, are still investing in, so free knowledge. In the kind of villa or townhouse area, like we're talking north of $700,000 net per year. It's not very good, but because there's scarcity, right, and the local council there is not going to, all of a sudden build up so many more. There's no land, so those kinds of kind of no lift, no pool, no elevator, like none of that kind of fancy stuff. You want boring, right? Boring, average, what the average person in that suburb wants. So those are definitely okay. Okay. So where were we with this? So you were asking me a question. Any other questions that just shoot them at me and I'll try to find other people.
Like just this year or last year,
Yeah.
how much do you factor sort of the technical analysis side of it, like where the prices of units are at a low, or they haven't risen like everyone else is moving. The units are low, so when does that sort of factor in? In your sort of, if you were sort of invest in another like a housing unit. So right now the units are it's a lot cheaper. They're going down.
Yeah.
All articles that unit prices nice and cheap. They've actually declined. So we're going down later.
Yeah. Like in property, what goes up doesn't always come down, and what goes down doesn't always go up. Right? So I think one thing, it's a good question, and one thing that you kind of need to unlearn sometimes is that just because something is cheap and affordable doesn't make it a good investment. Doesn't mean that it will rise in value. Like people have been talking about Brisbane for probably 7 years. It's affordable, as soon as Sydney boomed, then people thought, hey, Melbourne and Brisbane. Melbourne boomed 5 years ago. It was like, well, Brisbane's the next one. Has anyone seen the booms in Brisbane?
Logan.
Hey,
Logan.
I'm not going to talk about that. But just because it's affordable doesn't mean it will go up in value, right? Like just because the prices are under 400 or under 500,000, whether it's a house or unit, doesn't mean that it will go up. What makes things go up is the balance between supply and demand. Right? That's just how economics works, right? You know, if I've only got 2 cans of Coke and you all guys want a can of Coke, then you're probably going to be willing to pay me like $5 or $6 for it, right? So similarly, if something is cheap but the demand isn't increasing, then it's not going to go up in value. So the system, the data analysis that we look at is actually what is the balance between supply and demand, not in 5 years' time or not in 10 years' time, but right now. And if demand exceeds supply right now, then that means prices will increase right now. And that's the kind of thing with property cycles as well. You know, people say that the property cycles are cyclical and it's like a clock. But just because something is in the recovery phase, like 6, 7 o'clock, doesn't mean that it will ever achieve 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, or certainly not in a cyclical fashion. There needs to be something that happens for it to go up, right? Like just because, let's take an example. Let's take it Sydney actually. So Sydney did it remarkably well up until 2003, right? Just after the Olympic Games, everyone's becoming millionaires also. And then from 2003 to 2011, it was dead flat, right? I don't know how many of you guys have been in Sydney for 20 years, but it was like dead flat. And I remember people in Sydney at that time saying, Sydney's the worst place to invest in property. Like this thing never goes up, it's kind of a stale city. Like that's exactly the opposite of what people say now. Nowadays people are like, you should only invest in Sydney because that's the only place that booms, right? But just looking at that context without a myopic view, like looking at the data history reveals so many things. So then Sydney was flat for 10 years. Where's the circular or cyclical clock in that period? And then it boomed between 2012 to 2016, early 17, mid 17. Great. And so then it was due for a protracted period of decline. There was a decline, if you guys remember, end of 2017, 18, like a very sort of compacted decline. And then what started happening in 2019? Like if you actually look at the data, places that most people don't think of as investment worthy, Campbelltown, Mount Druitt, Penrith, kind of late 2019, they started going up, right? Like you would have made $100,000 in Penrith if you had bought in like December 2019 compared to December 2020. Meanwhile, COVID was like killing the world, right? $100,000 in Penrith. So that, it started coming up again very quickly, right? If you went by the property cycle theory, then we were due for another 10 years of stagnation, right? And I mean, I don't know who's buying and selling properties in Sydney right now, but we're definitely not in stagnation. Like, it's pretty crazy. So there is no cyclical clock. What dictates prices, whether it's units or houses, is supply and demand, right? And so that's kind of the main thing that I want. If there's one thing that you guys can take out of this, is that kind of unlearn everything that you've learned to some extent and really hone in on quantifying supply and demand. Because just because there's a train station 3 kilometers from your house or 2 kilometers and there's really nice Coles, maybe Bunnings has come up there, all these kinds of things, that doesn't actually create price growth, right? What if at the same time there was 500 building approvals and so there were more and more houses being built, then all that additional demand would have been sucked up into supply. So is this kind of giving you guys value? Yeah. Thanks for that. Any sort of, what were the other key sort of pain points or issues that you had discussed with your partner? Just please put your hand up and share. Would you have one? No. Okay.
Malaysia. So nice seeing you today. So first time into investment. I'm not invested yet, but I've been there for more than 4 years.
Can you just speak a little bit louder,
Louder? Okay.
Sorry.
Happy to. So I've been in Sydney for more than 4 years now. Tried to have a house as a PPOR, as a place of residence, but then gave up that idea and then followed your group and then understood that no, it's better to have it in the investment space. But I'm sure I've gathered some inputs from people here. Being a newbie where I'm a bit, or even talk to my friends where we are a bit stuck is, should we go and do the fishing ourselves, like how the lady mentioned or the gentleman mentioned, or should we rather, personally I'm getting a bit inclined towards those, I'm not saying agents, but those agent houses who plot you 10-year timeline and then they say, hey, you invest now, you buy 3 now, and then this is how it will go. They show the depreciation of the property or tax benefits and other stuff. I might be a bit flashy. I listened to your video 6-7 minutes ago, why you told it should not go, but very honest, I'm like on the fence. I'm sitting on the wall. Should I, or as well as being time poor, which I believe many of us here would be, like, hey, should I go the way of getting educated and then getting into it? What if I don't manage time? I lose another year, searches, and they are giving me a ready-made prepped version. Go with them, I save my time, and maybe, I mean, honestly, in that dilemma, and big time dilemma, I wake up in the morning thinking, scratching my head, which way to go. Yes, I'm not sure if many of us would be in the same state, or maybe because I'm a newbie, but that's what I find myself in. Any thoughts or suggestions on this would be much appreciated.
Thank you for being honest. So effectively the question was, I'm thinking on one side to buy a sort of brand new house and land package because it's all done and dusted, great depreciation benefits, the sales pitch is immaculate, and it doesn't take me any time. Whereas the other side is like this guy PK saying not to do that, effectively. So please put your hand up if you're also thinking the same question or you're also considering a house and land package. Okay, there's your answer, no, just joking. There was a few people considering it. So, look, the way that I'd explain this is when my son turns 10, I can either give him $1 million and say, look, you're pretty much set. Hopefully you make your life really awesome and good luck with everything. I've equipped you, no time taken off me, just you got enough money, sort your life. Or I can say, look, I'm not going to give you $1 million. I'm actually going to be a father. I'm actually going to take the time to nurture you and to train you and become friends with you because I value what you could become. Right? It's not the perfect analogy, but it's very similar to buying a house and land package versus something a little bit more better. House and land package, easy. It's turnkey, someone's done the work for you. There's a nice brochure that says that you'll become rich in 10 years, or I'm exaggerating, but you get what I mean. It doesn't take any of your time, and it just seems awesome, right? Like, easy solution, right? Whereas on the other side, you have to put in some time. On the other side, you need to learn. On the other side, you need to kind of go away from the mainstream because all of my friends are also doing house and land packages, right? The reality is that to buy a house and land package is not a bad idea, okay? And this is on camera. It's not actually a bad idea, but there are much better ideas. Okay, so like depreciation is a selling point. Great, if you're on a high income, you get your depreciation, you get your income down. But the reality is that if you ever sell that house, if you ever sell it, then half of that needs to be paid back to the ATO, right? Capital gains tax, 50% discount, all the rest of it. Okay, so it's not kind of like a free lunch. And the principle that I want people to understand, even if you weren't considering a house and land package, is that what grows is the land, not the property. Okay, what grows in value is the land, not the actual dwelling. So if you're paying $1 million for a house and land package, let's just say for round numbers, you're predominantly paying, or at least the majority or key portion of that is the actual dwelling, because it's new. It's like a brand new Mercedes off the dealership. And what happens to that Mercedes as soon as you pay that $150K and you drive it out? Like, it's no longer worth $150K. So the dwelling depreciates. In your head, you're thinking, that's great, I get to tax back. In reality, you're losing money. Okay? What grows is the land component. So when you buy established, not a house and land package, you're predominantly, ideally, sort of paying 60, 70, 80% plus for the actual land. The land is what increases. So like, it's kind of funny. If we could just buy land, we'd do it. Because that is what will go up in value. But we need to have a dwelling on there to just pay the rent, right? Give us that positive cash flow. Ideally, if we didn't need the positive cash flow, we'd just all buy land. But we need to pay our bills. We need to pay the mortgage off. So you should target the land predominantly. And this kind of comes back to I think the question that you asked before as well. Should I go for capital growth or positive cash flow? Like, in your mind, you might be thinking, well, you know what, like, do I really care about capital growth? I'm getting the depreciation benefit, I'm getting the cash flow up, it's instant gratification. But that's basically all it is, because you're making maybe, after depreciation, maybe you're increasing your income by $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per annum by saving tax. But unless that thing goes up in value, after 10 years you would have saved $150,000 in tax. Correct? Whereas the other guy, or the other person who actually bought it, you could say, not the lazy strategy, but actually put a little bit of time, we're talking like 2, 3, 4 hours a week to buy a property. They've got, in positive cash flow over 10 years, let's say $100,000, or I'm just using round numbers, but they've got $500,000 or $1 million of capital growth. So when you think long term, you kind of have to think, okay, it's not about instant gratification. It's about what is my objective in the long term. Like, this is a fundamental bugbear I have, because it's coming from confusion. People think that I want to save tax, but at the same time I want to create passive income, right? I want to save tax, but at the same time create passive income. But in most cases, those are completely opposite objectives. Because the way to save tax is actually to lose money. It's actually to lose income. Right? You only save tax when you lose $1 and you get 45% of that back, or 37% of it, or 33% of it back. It's like diametrically opposite to creating passive income. If you buy 5 house and land packages, not only will they not be positively geared for tax, so if you lose your job, they're all costing you money. But in the long term, they're going to underperform in terms of capital growth. And the passive income story is not going to be there in the long term. And kind of, sorry, just on a bit of a tangent as well, I hope this is adding value. Positive cash flow in itself isn't the goal either. Like, let's say you buy a positive cash flow property, it gives you $5,000 pre-tax positive cash flow. Great, high fives all around. Now, most people in this room, I can hazard a guess to say, will have some sort of target in 10 years or 20 years, they want to achieve a 6-figure passive income, right? Or 80,000, 90, whatever, something like that. If all you're buying is positive cash flow property, then how many properties do you need to achieve that outcome? Like 20, right? And like, I can't afford 20 properties. I'm pretty sure no one in this room can afford 20 properties, right? That's why you need the capital growth. You need the positive cash flow through the journey to pay for those properties, pay them off slowly. But the positive cash flow in of itself isn't going to pay the property off. Like $5,000 a year is not going to make a dent into a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 property, right? So what you ultimately need is that capital growth so that in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you can sell 1, 2, 3 of those properties off, bank the cash, use that cash to pay off the other 1, 2, 3 that you didn't sell, and that's where your passive income comes, completely unencumbered by debt. Does that make sense? Like, it's very, very hard. I want you to connect with this point. It's very, very hard to achieve a 6-figure passive income unless you have a debt reduction strategy that is more than simply paying principal and interest. Is that making sense? So if that is true, like deductive logic, if that is true, then you need capital growth. And if you need capital growth, then a house and land package is not the best idea, because it won't give you the capital growth relative to these other types of investments. Like, sorry, being a little bit nerdy here, it's just deductive logic, right? Did that sort of help, George?
Isn't it different from buying a land and building?
Buying land and building. So what's the question?
So like buying land and then have the ones that are instead of house and package, buying land and then building something.
Right. I see. So buying land and building, if you're doing it yourself, is actually a good idea. But only in areas where, once again, the fundamentals of the suburb suggest that demand is greater than supply. Right? So you can buy a block of land and build on it. Like, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Melbourne, but between sort of Melbourne proper and sort of Western Melbourne over towards Melton, there's lots and lots of land, right? So a lot of people are buying land and building, but if there are going to be 5,000 or 10,000 houses being built there in the next 5 years, do you think that demand will exceed supply? It could. I haven't done that, but it's unlikely to, right? So once again, the foundation of our property investing should be suburb selection. Like, that is the most important thing, and then the strategy that we layer on top, house and land package, established house, or buying land and building, that's a layer on top. And if you can find a block of land in a growth suburb and develop it yourself, well, that's a good strategy, right? You can get the depreciation that Shailesh is talking about, but you haven't sacrificed the capital growth. Does that make sense? Yeah.
How about grifting is those areas?
So I can't talk about all suburbs here today, but I'm happy to try as many as you like. Not a good idea. So Griffin and like in general, like kind of the North Lakes, Mango Hill, Narangba, Redcliffe, that whole kind of area, if you look at the building approvals that the council has approved in the last, even if you go back 3 years, there are literally thousands. Right? So yes, there's a new Bunnings. Like, who's heard that you should follow Bunnings wherever they go? Right? There's a new Bunnings there. There's an IKEA there. There's like Westfield, Costco, like all these things that everyone says, oh, these guys are much smarter than me. Like, why not just follow where Coles is going, or Woolies, or Bunnings, or wherever? But here's an example of that pocket of Brisbane where there's literally been 10,000 houses built in the last 5 years that experienced no growth. Right? And all of the Facebook ads that you're seeing, I know you guys are seeing this, right? The sponsored ads, every third ad is getting you into those places. I'm not going to name names because it's been recorded. But same with Logan, same with Ipswich, same with all those kinds of places. Does that help?
So back to strategy. So are you saying, where does the capital growth properties come in your portfolio? Like, should you start there and then start on?
It's a great question. So once again, very similar to your question, sometimes the popular vernacular or theory is that let's buy a capital growth property and then let's get a positive cash flow property, and then a capital growth and then a positive cash flow. Because the underlying assumption is that the capital growth property is negative geared. Like, I don't know how this is wired into us, but somehow or other, the natural assumption is that if it's negatively geared, then naturally it will grow. Right? Or that if it's a growth property, it's naturally negatively geared. Like, I definitely didn't learn that at school, but somehow in property kind of information, you kind of pick this up. But that's completely not true. Like, completely not true. Right? So anyone who thinks that you need to balance a portfolio, one capital growth, one positively geared, like, isn't that a really inefficient use of funds? Like let's say you're paying $400,000 for a positive cash flow property that gives you realistically, and it's going to give you about 5,000 post all expenses. So you just spent 400K for 5,000. Like the return on investment, like I used to be a statistician, I can't do it in my head anymore, is like less than 2%, right? It's not a good investment. So why would you buy something that only gives you positive cash flow? So the answer, at least my answer to that question is every single property should be capital growth and should be positive. Every single property in your portfolio should give you money after all expenses, and every single one of them should grow not after 10 years, but in the first year, 2 years, 3 years. And the harsh reality, like this is the truth that you're not here from these kind of webinars and seminars, thank you, and all these kind of things that you do online when you click a link and you have to put in your email address. The harsh reality is that it's more difficult than ever to start investing in property right now than it was 10 years ago. Right? So even though I kind of have my story and kind of like gloating all that kind of thing, the reality is that it's harder now than ever. Right? And the reason is not because interest rates are lower, that's a good thing, right? The reason is that borrowing capacity is much higher. So just like Snehal was saying before, right? Like you're capped out after 3 or 4 properties. The reality is if, I or her or anyone can only buy 4 properties in a year or 2 years, and we're balancing out one capital growth, one positive cash flow, we're never going to get to our goals. So more than ever in 2021, you need each and every property to do everything for you. Like that's just the reality. It's not what you want to hear, it's not what sells my course, but that's the truth.
Capital growth and positive.
Correct.
So just on that borrowing capacity, does that mean that you can find yourself in a situation where you've got 3 properties that are going up in value, positive cash flow, yet you're still maxed out in terms of your values? So you can't ever get to that 7-8 properties, wait for that to mature, sell down a couple, even if 3 or 4 properties. That's a reality, isn't it?
That's a reality, and it's not that you'll never get there. Some people may never get there, but it's a question of time. Like once again, we can't expect to acquire 5 or 6 properties in 2 or 3 years, right? I know there's stories out there, a bit like mine, 10 properties in 10 years, all that kind of thing. But those are the exceptions. That's kind of the marketing speak. The reality is it's not that easy. And the reason, or the biggest reason for that is borrowing capacity. Now, it's not always going to be like this, right? 10 years ago, borrowing capacity was so much easier, and 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now, borrowing capacity may be so much easier. These things are cyclical. So just because you're capped out today, like I said before, doesn't mean you're capped out in 2 years or 3 years. In fact, probably in around September, October time, things are going to get much easier. So I'm just going to take a break. So what I'm going to do now, with not a lot of preparation, is, where's Samir? Samir's gone. So I'm going to ask Erhan. So Erhan is a client of mine, but he's actually not bought a property yet through the course. This is not about sales and marketing, but I just want you guys to hear from like someone who's not like a poster child for like getting rich quick, but just a normal person, right? So I literally asked her at the start of the session if he'd be comfortable doing this, and he said yes, so very, very cool. So yeah, I just wanted everyone to sort of learn from his experience, because he does have an investment property. I just want him to share his background, I suppose, in the last few years of being in the property space, if you're comfortable, what you bought initially, why you signed up to my course, don't sell it, and kind of where you're at now in terms of kind of your mindset.
So, hey guys, so my name's Erhan, I work in IT, so no background in finance or accounting or anything like that. I was looking at ways to reduce my tax bill, as most of us probably in that position. So actually, I started reaching out to some financial advisors or wealth property agencies, they call them. They initially suggested that perhaps it would be best that I look at a house and land package. Gave me all the numbers on why it was such an attractive proposition. You'll get this much back on depreciation, etc., etc. Numbers seemed to stack up, but I soon realised that probably wasn't a great idea, and didn't take me long. Just went on some forums, realised that it wasn't going to give me the capital gains that I needed. I then started to shift my attention to houses or property that had a decent land to value ratio. Unfortunately, I pigeonholed myself into thinking that I had to invest in Sydney. And although I bought at the right time, so I bought in March last year, so just when COVID was sort of hitting fever pitch in Australia, bought an old townhouse in Melbourne. Now, obviously at the time it was a good deal. It was hardly any competition. The seller was actually quite desperate as well. So I bought what I thought was a pretty good deal. I don't think you can really get a townhouse for that price at the moment in Melbourne. However, post that, BK, went through the course, realised that I had to do a lot of unknowing, and I think that's the message that I would probably have to everyone here. There's a lot of stuff that we've picked up over the years. Probably in different property forums. We can't really decipher between what's good advice and bad advice because we've got nothing to sort of go back to. There's no sort of baseline, no platform. Being able to go through a course with a certain methodology that's very scientific, data-driven, it was obvious that there were far better investment options. And what it's done is it's put me in a position now to take that next step. So I've been working on refinancing my current home loan. Been able to do that, extract some equity. So now I have a deposit. And now I'm looking at those areas that I know are prime for growth. I've actually been following the market for the last year now since I've done that course. So I can actually retrospectively look back and say, well, I actually picked these properties in March, April last year, and I can see that they've all gone up. Some have gone up maybe 10%, some have gone up 15%. But when you consider what we've gone through, the fact that COVID has impacted property prices, those suburbs that I was, penciling down, they've all done quite well. So it gives me the confidence to be able to now start making offers in those areas that I'm confident will do well again in the near future.
Good luck, mate.
Does anyone have any questions for Erhan? Like, this is not a sales and marketing thing for me, not about the course, but just about his experience and anything at all.
I'm curious, after doing the course, thanks for sharing by the way, do you look at your previous purchase with new eyes and I guess question whether you should sell it or back out of that deal and then move on to something with new knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly I critique that purchase, and I did pretty much even throughout the course. I was saying, well, if I had this knowledge, I certainly would have bought that property. In saying that, because of the buy-sell cost, it doesn't really make it worthwhile. So it's more of look, it's not a complete disaster of a purchase, not by any stretch of the imagination. Could I have done better? Absolutely. But it's not worth selling it and losing out because it's an investment I've made. So I'm just sort of shelving that and saying that's a long-term play. The good thing is I have been able to extract some equity out. So the fact that I can go again so soon makes it a bit of a no-brainer to park that property. If I didn't have a mechanism to be able to go again, then perhaps I would have considered it more seriously to say, well, okay, I'm not going to be able to buy for the next 3-4 years. I should cut my losses and sell that property. I'm not in that position, so that's sort of the logic behind saying, that's sort of the rookie era. We'll park that to the side. I'm sure it'll do well in the future, and we just sort of move on and look to the future.
I have a question. In your course, do you have, you kind of half answered it, can you be more specific as far as the mindset is concerned, the mindset you had beforehand, and then throughout the weeks of going through that course, what did you learn from that, and what have you removed from establishing new habits when you are looking for property?
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just that, the courage, everything else that comes with it, the psychological.
Yeah, definitely. So pre the course, it was all about, okay, I want something that's sort of, good value. It's the right time to buy. Can't afford a house in Sydney, so it'll have to be a townhouse. Made sure it wasn't a nice shiny one, so I had plenty of land value. But the logic behind that was, because it's so old, perhaps in the near future it will get rezoned. Perhaps a developer will come and buy us out, may get a couple of units out of it. Effectively a development strategy without actually doing the development yourself. But that was more of a hope and a prayer, right? And I thought, if that doesn't happen, it's a long-term play. But the mindset shift happened when I realised, well, if I consider every property as a long-term play, then I'll never get to the destination that I need to get to. So the mindset change was, we need to buy something that's going to appreciate in value in the short term, because then you can just recycle the equity and then go a second, third, fourth time, obviously, depending on your serviceability. Right, so easier said than done. I already asked the question around, is that the reality for some people? If you've got a great salary, then perhaps that's easier. But if you don't have a lot of income, then that methodology is a lot harder.
And so the mindset before, you were already pretty courageous there. You're prepared to take a risk and get into the market. But after being more educated, did you have, say, bigger dreams or aspirations now that you kind of are more educated? That's what I mean, like.
Yeah, certainly more educated.
More than technical.
Yeah, so it's more, it's less about XYZ will happen in the long-term future, and that's where I'll make my money. It's more about picking property that I'm reasonably confident will go up in the short term. That's not the mindset that I had pre-course. That answers the question. And obviously there's more to it. There's the confidence to be able to buy interstate. PK already touched on, being able to get property managers in that area to do some of that lead work for you. It's something that I just wasn't aware of, right? So you were really stuck in a position where you may have the right property interstate, but then you've got to hop on a plane, inspect the property. Are you really the best person to make the inspection? You don't really have any awareness of what's around you, whether there's any structural problems. You need to do a building test, obviously, but it just felt like an inefficient way of acquiring property. Because you've got, it just illustrates the fact that you've got to have a good team around you to be able to say, that's your property manager, your conveyancer, your mortgage broker. If you don't have those people around you, then I think it becomes a lot more difficult.
It's a big theatre.
And guys, feel free to leave if you want. We're probably not going to go on for too much longer, but I know it's getting late as well. So I'm just going to ask Samir as well to kind of share his experience. So Erhan was someone who hadn't bought a property through the course just yet, kind of figuring out his financing. Samir is someone who's actually bought more than one property through the course, and he's made more than $100,000 of just one property in less than 12 months. in equity whilst it actually not costing him anything to hold. So once again, I don't really want this to come across as kind of a sales thing for me, but I genuinely want you guys to be inspired by what's possible. So yeah, if you could just kind of explain like where you had the apartment and
Yeah.
the story and stuff.
Hi everyone, my name is Samir. I'm in my mid to late 20s now. I started my investment journey about 5 years ago, and I didn't have a lot of wealth of knowledge around me, so I had a criteria. I'll be quite transparent with you guys. It was about 500k, and I thought, I really want to get into the market. I'm young and I've worked hard. I saved X amount, $100,000 or whatever it was for a 20% deposit at the time. Doing a bit of research, and the area that I was living in, some of you might resonate to this. There's properties being sold around the area that you're living in, and you know the area really well. You've lived there for 5, 10, 15, or however long you've lived in the area, and you tend to actually buy in your own backyard. And that was very much like pretty much myself. I bought a 1-bedroom apartment in the suburb that I live in, off the plan, and it's back in 2016. So it was sort of towards the peak of the market, but not quite there yet, and it was going to settle in about 2018, so about 3-4 years ago. I was a bit cheeky, so the plan was obviously this was an investment property. The way I did it was, it's just down the road. I'll live in it for 6 months. People have that mentality as well. I'll use the stamp duty exemption. I'll get the government grants, and 6 months later, I'll move out. All good, investment done. I've saved 30, 40k, however much it is. Looking back, obviously, it wasn't a disaster, I would say. There are, like PK says, there are better options. Apartments, yes, fundamentally, like land appreciates, buildings appreciate. In terms of my experience going forward, so then I sat down and thought, look, I bought this property, I've lived in it for 6 months, I've come out, what's next? I'm a bit ambitious, I like to keep moving forward in life, and rather than stall and just do my day-to-day job. I work 9 to 5 as an accountant, so it keeps me pretty busy. I'm good with numbers, I would say, but not the greatest. So basically what happened after my purchase, and I moved back home with my parents back in 2019, I started researching again, and I wanted to get the next purchase. Preferably I was looking at a house. I knew the Central Coast is pretty close to me, it's only an hour away, and it's a nice, beautiful area, and I feel like, in my gut feel, I thought, this area is actually going to grow. It's beautiful, why wouldn't someone want to live here? There's nice houses there. It's people commute from Central Coast down to Sydney, so I actually started jumping on realestate.com and started looking at a whole bunch of houses all over the Central Coast, and I was a bit overwhelmed with all the information that I had. So then I thought, let's start looking at some courses, some seminars, engaging particularly with people that have built a property portfolio, because I wanted to learn off someone who's done the journey and been there, so I could get the sort of like a real life experience rather than something on an ad or something like that. I read a couple of books, signed up to a few podcasts and things like that, got a whole bunch of knowledge. And basically it was like a mind map. I had so much information and all this knowledge, but it was being able to actually have the confidence to be able to apply all of that and take the step forward and buy something else and be proud of that. So then I thought, I was a bit skeptical. I was holding back on things. I was looking at houses, but I wasn't really sure about the area. Overall, the reason I couldn't actually buy something was it was too time consuming, and my confidence was not meeting the time that I had to be able to do this. I thank myself to be able to join a fantastic Facebook group, which I'm sure you all are part of. I would say that I obviously have worked with PK the last year or so. And basically what I'm going to talk about now is my journey after the PK's course, basically the Property Investment Accelerator. So I did the course, and within days I was mind blown because, sorry, I'm not trying to sell anything here. I don't know anything. I was mind blown because the information that provided, there were a lot of concepts and a lot of ideas and a lot of data factors, things you need to actually look at, what's important, what doesn't really matter so much. And all that information just fed through me, and I just thought, I started on the other end looking at realestate.com. Let's look at houses that my gut feel was like, I liked the area. Just based on my opinion, there was no data, there was no research, there was no science behind anything. There was no numbers. I never looked at what the average price was. I knew Central Coast was roughly not too expensive compared to Sydney, but 500k would get me a decent house there. Did the course, mind blown, and it gave me the strength, the knowledge, the confidence to actually go out in the market and buy another property without having a fear factor or anything like that that might hold me back. Okay, so I finished the course early last year, pretty much a year ago from around now, and I didn't actually buy an investment property for about 6 months or so. The reason behind that was my lending strategy was not correct, and I learned a lot about lending from the course, and not only from the course but also from the network that I had with the excellent broker that I had that was working for me. And I think having the right course, the right knowledge, and having the team around you to be able to do this for you and execute your next purchase or your first purchase properly was the very crucial factor. Now, I have friends dealing with mortgage brokers that just want to get the loan over the line. They don't care about the next loan and the next loan and the next loan. And that's what's really important, because the last thing you want, you got your nice property, you have the borrowing capacity, but there's some issue and you can't get another loan, and you just stall. And my personal goal is to build a passive income, obviously, like I'm sure most of you who wouldn't want a passive income, of $100,000 to $200,000 in the next 10 to 15 years. So it's quite stock standard. I mean, there's nothing flashy about it. Where was I? God. Sorry. Yeah, got the confidence, and then I thought, okay, let's, so I was talking about the lending strategy. So basically what I did was the apartment that I bought, I refinanced that, pulled a whole bunch of equity out that my previous two brokers couldn't do that because they didn't have the right expertise to be able to execute that deal. And my excellent mortgage broker was able to do that on the first go like that without any kickback from the bank. Okay, so I pulled out a ton of equity, over $100,000 of equity from that apartment that I bought that I thought was great. It has saved me in one way or another. And basically what I did was not a dollar down from my own savings. I was able to purchase an investment property in Newcastle. And this property, I should talk about the suburb first rather than the specific property. As you know, from my understanding, the suburb is 70 to 80% of the value or the growth that you'll experience in the short to long term. This suburb was extremely high demand. It had so much interest from other people, other buyers in the market. Beautiful area, I've never been there. I've been there, I'll talk about it, but I hadn't been there at the time, didn't know anything about the area, and I was relying very confidently on the data that was behind the suburb. And the area, not just the exact suburb, but the town or the city, Newcastle in particular. So this was back in about, I think, July, August last year, so about almost 6 months since I worked with PK. And extremely high demand. I basically found one property. It didn't even have a price on it because there's such a high demand in that area that people are literally just throwing money and they're just buying emotionally based. Okay, so first-time buyers, families with young kids, and so on. And I thought, God, I'll just put an offer based on what I think, what I know, what I believe that the value, the true market value of this property is. and basically the offer was knocked back. My budget for this property was 550k. The suburbs median was almost 550k, I think it was 540 something. So it was right up there, but this suburb had a very, very high demand. Like, I can't explain, like, the suburbs that I'm looking at now, none of them have been in this sort of demand. Very hard to get over the line. Sorry, I'll keep this a bit short. $526,000 I offered on this property. It was about, I thought it was worth around 540. I mean, I was sort of pushing it as well. Went for open home. There's about 20 to 30 different buyer groups. Like I said, high demand, and basically went under contract for the first open home. And the expectations from the agent to me were that, mate, you need to increase your offer. I've got so much demand on this. You're looking at mid to late 500, so about, in the late 500s. And I thought, forget it. I'm not going to just put an extra 40, 50k because that's not the value. That's not what I've learned, and that's not what. It's not going to, the numbers won't work out in the short term for me. The property sold for $580,000, and I thought, oh damn, like someone really got ripped off, or really overpaid, maybe potentially. And then I started looking again in the suburb. 2 other properties popped up, and they weren't perfectly what I wanted, but they also sold for $580 and $582. So now I'm thinking, God, these are 3-bedroom houses in Newcastle, and this particular suburb that I want to buy in, and they're all in the late 500s, and I'm thinking, do I step out of the suburb and look at somewhere else, maybe somewhere where the median price is in the late 4s? But what I did was, there was a video that PK actually posted, and I encourage you, if you are, one of the challenges I'm currently facing is being able to buy a property in an extremely high demand market where there's a lot of buyers. There's not many properties available for sale, and you're competing against first-home buyers, promotional-based buyers, and so on. And I think some of you may be able to relate to this. What I did was, I actually started calling a few agents in that area, namely about 3 or 4 different agents. One of them really clicked on, and we had really good conversations. And I told them I was genuine. I already put an offer down on one of the other properties, which sold for $580, so he already knew I was in the market, I was serious, I was ready to go, had my pre-approval ready to go, and basically nothing really popped up, and literally waited a month to 6 weeks, so 4 to 6 weeks for another property to pop up. I got a call on a Friday afternoon. I was working, doing my accounting job, doing taxes and so on, and he goes, hey mate, I've got a property for you, XXX Street, blah, blah, blah. And he said, have a look, let me know what you think. It's going to go to market in a couple of weeks, but just give you the preempt because I know you're looking, it suits your criteria, it's a 3-bedroom nice home and so on. Then I looked at the property online. Obviously there was not a lot of information available, and because it's not advertised. And I was able to do my due diligence based on the information that I have, and having the confidence from the course to be able to put an offer down on a property unseen, without any proper photos or anything like that. And I was able to do that, and I put an offer for about, I think it was about 540k. And I know the last 3-4 houses have sold in the late 500s. 540k didn't get knocked back instantly, but it was put on hold, and they wanted to run a private inspection for their particular buyers, like me, who were first-time buyers. Maybe they were on the books because they lost the other properties. Maybe they did the open inspection, and basically what happened was the agent came back to me and said, hey, we've got someone that's really interested. He's actually going to pay in the late 500s. Do you want to increase your price? But also to let you know that this person doesn't have the pre-approval, so the seller is still looking to go to market in the next week or so, because we were a week down the track. And I said, oh, look mate, 540k is where I'm at. I'll reconsider my offer and give you my maximum, and even though that was my maximum, I'll bump it up by another 5-6 grand or so. I didn't say that verbally. Obviously, I did some high-level calculations off the back of the envelope, and sort of was able to do that within 20 minutes or so. Just give him an extra 5-6k more. After that, what happened was really, it was really between me and the seller, and pretty much they were paused on going to the market because basically they want to sell it at 550. They wanted to put another 5. It's a mental thing. I feel like some sellers might have. Let's not sell for 540. Something that's 550. We're in the mid range. And I was talking to a couple of the. I was talking to my family at the time. I think in the grand scheme of things, another $5,000 if I put down. For me, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, look at the market. Like these properties are selling for 580 and so on, and who knows what's going to happen. I've been looking at this property for the last this area the last month and a half or so. So I did put down the extra 5K. The offer did get accepted at 550K, and I was really excited, really happy. Didn't even bother going to see it. They actually secured a tenant in that property on the day after the settlement, so 0 days of vacancy. Secured a tenant paying really good rent, so it was they're paying about $500 a week at the moment, which is going to increase, but that's a separate story. So I was really happy, and I'm really stoked about the result because this property settled end of November. It was a longer settlement because the buyer had other reasons why, because they wanted to buy something else and so on. In today's date, I don't want to smash you with numbers. I know people would say I made $100,000 in equity or so on. Market value, and there's nothing cool about this. This is, I'm not trying to present a really excellent case. This is very much achievable, and I'm sure with time, it's 6 months down the track. Like I said, it's a very high demand suburb. The recent sales are showing that the 3-bedroom, same type of houses have sold just above 600K, so that's about $70,000 sort of market value that I could potentially put into practice. But only last week or so, a property sold 3-bedroom, a smaller block of land, probably the same age, maybe older, sold for $700,000. So the suburb has really escalated. Even the 4-bedroom houses that were about 650K, 100K more than a 3-bedroom house, have actually a recent one sold for $905,000. So excellent result. I haven't done a proper valuation. I don't need to just yet, but I am looking at purchasing more properties. In fact, I did actually purchase some property end of last year as well over in Adelaide. I don't want to keep going unless you want to have a chat afterwards, but I can share my experience on that. And looking to go again and maybe again, because why not? You have to borrow in capacity until you come back and you have a break. Yeah. So that's my experience. I mean, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to.
I just want to say as well, like, I can't take any credit. Yeah, like I've got the course and everything, but I'm not a buyer's agent. Like, my clients do it themselves. So like that was entirely Samir. Of course we had some calls and I helped him, but like I didn't know what he was buying until he told me what it is, basically. So I just want to also give him a round of applause. So does anyone have once again, it seems like too good to be true and all that kind of thing. But like, genuinely a person, and I'm using the 100K equity thing, that just made 100K equity in less than 6 months or 6 months? 7 months, I think, 8 months. Like it's possible, you know what I mean? Like this isn't kind of stuff in fairy tales and like, just in those kind of sleazy Facebook ads, and like this actually happens. So many of you have probably experienced it as well, like, we're not the only ones that have been doing well. But if anyone's kind of thinking, what if my property tanks in value, what if I can't get a tenant? Like that's a classic as well, what if I can't get a tenant? Like 0 days of vacancy, the data tells us everything, like this stuff is possible. I just want you to take out in this meeting today, like it's possible.
Would you keep drawing out equity on this property?
I haven't touched the equity on this property.
Yeah.
I drew equity off my first property
to
buy this property, and then used the savings that I had since the last 4 years or so to buy the Adelaide. For the third.
Can I ask a question? Now, is this possible? I mean, does this have to do even a bit with the current property boom, or is this replicable even in a cold market? Such a success story.
So the question was whether this boom happens. Is that right?
Yeah.
Boom happens all the time, or
No,
in that specific?
right now we all know that the property boom is going on. So, is this like the 100K equity or whatever? Is that possible to be replicated in the long run? Like say after 6 years, if the property market is down and it's flat, still we can find properties which can give similar.
Yeah, so like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Yeah, so like let's just go take a walk in history, and let's ignore Sydney Melbourne because everything went up in the last month, right? So in 2015, if you bought a property in Hobart, which you should have, looking at the data, that thing is worth double what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There was no boom for the last 5 years in Sydney, right? Only kind of 16, 17. If you bought a property in Geelong in 2016, that thing went up by 200,000. We're not talking $1 million properties. We're talking $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 properties. That thing went up $200,000, $300,000 in the next 3 years. You bought a property in Ballarat in 2017. That thing worth $350 back then is now worth more than $500 right now. You bought a property 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Newcastle. Much like what Samir is saying, that thing is skyrocketed. You bought a property in Adelaide last year, like in February, March last year, when I'm sure everyone was seeing those predictions, 30% housing crash, the same banks are now saying 20% housing boom, but that's a different story. Like that Adelaide property has gone up $100,000. Like this thing is repeatable.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? Like otherwise, how are you earning passive income? 6 figures in 10 or 20 years, otherwise it wouldn't be possible. So it's repeatable.
Yeah.
So I think what concerns us at the moment with what we investment is that we're sort of at the peak of the market in a lot of places. So what worries us is that we might not pay too much, and that's what holds us back.
Right.
So how do we feel assured of in a lot of suburbs because it's just skyrocketed so much over the past year.
Right.
How do you
That's a good question. It's a good
sort
question.
of feeling that I'm paying too much and like buying it's still in the car.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I'm going to be honest, am I going to share your suburb? Can I share the suburb?
So I'm not buying there again because it doesn't line up anymore.
So don't buy in Tangira Heights in Newcastle because that's where it went up that much, right? The reason I'm sharing the suburb is that there is no one property market. If there was one Australian property market, then you'd say, look, I'm in Sydney, things are crazy, it's not a good time to buy, right? But the reality is that there's capital cities, there's secondary cities like Wollongong, Geelong, Newcastle, Gold Coast, etc. And then there's regional cities. Overall, there's 15,000 suburbs. And each of them has their own place on the demand to supply balance. So right now, is it a good time to buy in Sydney? Right? Like, it's a bit crazy. Look, our price is going to fall. Probably not, right? I don't think they're going to fall. But you're buying something at least